this panel, we want to talk about export diversification. Export diversification is the #1 priority of Enterprise Florida programs today, and I think it will be for the foreseeable future. We have a great panel with us, and they are going to be talking about opportunities in different regions of the world that we urge Florida companies to look closely at. So what I will do is I'll introduce every panelist as their turn comes to speak. And the first panelist is going to be Mr. Antonio Acunzo, a good friend of Florida, actually a man that began his business, his current business here in the state of Florida in Miami. Antonio is the CEO of Marketing That Works, which is a marketing company that assists companies on market entry, on doing businesses in the markets of the ASEAN region. Antonio is based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, but also does business in Singapore. So he does business in both countries seamlessly, and also has great expertise on doing business on the whole region. So without further ado, our friend Antonio Acunzo. And I want to thank Antonio for coming all the way from Singapore to join us today.
Thanks for having me. Oh, okay. Excellent. Well, we are actually talking about a region which is actually the right opposite of Florida, 12 time zones away from here. Completely on the other side. I landed yesterday evening, only 28 hours of flying time from Singapore to over here, 4 flights. Anyway, ASEAN is, how can I define that? The new frontier for foreign market entry and new business development. It's the new powerhouse in Asia. It's the driving force of the new Asia, which currently today drives global economic growth. It's a melting pot, because I cannot define it otherwise, of 10 different countries, 10 different economies, completely different one from the other, different from a cultural perspective, from an economic perspective, from a political perspective, yet with a common vision towards economic integration. It's not something of the kind of the European Union, completely different. They keep remaining independent. They don't want to become a single political identity. It would be impossible in Asia in any case, considering the cultural differences, but it's a driving force for one simple reason. I tried to recap in this slide a few stats about the 10 markets. As a matter of fact, we have a huge diversity. We are talking about an overall population in Southeast Asia. ASEAN, as a matter of fact, stands for Association of Southeast Asia Nations, and it comprises, sorry, I have to use this one, yes. And it comprises 10 different countries that differs very much one from the other. We have Singapore, which is the business financial core hub, the strategic hub where business drives throughout the region. We have 2 major future partners in the TPP free trade agreement, which is Malaysia and Vietnam. Currently far distant from the status of Singapore today, but we are talking about overall a population of over 600 million consumers, which is actually double the size of the US, 1.5 times the European Union. We have different degrees of GDP growth in the region, but staggering at 5 to 8% year-on-year growth, which is something that in good old Europe we have forgotten years back, for instance. And overall, the trade corresponds to 2.4 billion US dollar, which is rather significant. If we step into the GDP per capita, that gives an idea of the complete diversity of the region, because Singapore, again, is well, it's a Singapore model. It's a one of a kind. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes, because it's absolutely the place to run business in the region. But this diversity is probably better described by the following slide, because this is really what is important and what is happening in Asia. The 2 the difference between the inner and the outer ring corresponds to the growth in middle-class consumer spending. It's a comparison between 2009 and 2030. So in 20 years, we have a growth of over 500 times in Asia Pacific compared to the growth in spending here in North America or in Europe. As a matter of fact, this is the driving force. We have in ASEAN a younger population, a ferocious appetite for consumer goods, for luxury goods. We have income that can allow something in the range of 40 to 46% of the income in non-primary expenses, which means that you can devote your income in purchasing items that in Europe or in the US we are forgetting to purchase from a certain perspective, and as a matter of fact, few of these markets have become luxury shining beacon. What's the business sectors that are experiencing strong growth in ASEAN? Basically 12, which ranges all the way from the luxury goods to the biomedical and the aerospace, design and furniture, food and wine, constructions, because there is basically a need for everything. Attention, it's not a need because they don't have anything. They are quite discerning about this, but the consumer spending and the younger population and the middle class are a great booster for driving consumers. Why ASEAN? A few reasons. The first one is that the rapid growth has turned ASEAN into a global powerhouse. These are completely new markets to create new business development. One important aspect for this market, there is a very positive sentiment towards the US and towards the West in general, Europe inclusive. This is amazingly important considering that we have two countries in particular which are Muslim countries. It's not the same perception that we may have of something sectarian or conservative that we may experience in other areas. It's absolutely pro-Western. Of all the 10 markets in ASEAN, we have to consider basically 4 markets in particular. Singapore, we'll see right now, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam, which are the most who will benefit from the TPP perspective. And here, Singapore. Singapore is basically a very tiny country, 15 by 30 miles. It's just a small island, the southernmost tip of the Malaysian peninsula. This is a fantastic example of how a country developed in a matter of 3 decades from third world to first world for one simple reason, which is this one. Singapore is the only country in Asia to get the AAA credit rating. It's the best country in the world to do business. It's number 3 in the competitiveness scoreboard after the US and Switzerland. But it's the 3 points with the red marks which are more important. It's business friendly, which means we are in a business environment with 0 bureaucracy and 0 corruption, which is something unique in the world, not only in the region, especially if we cross and do business in other parts of Southeast Asia. Any company can operate in Singapore as 100% foreign ownership. Most of the businesses from US and Europe and Australia use Singapore as the base for managing and developing new business in the region for an important aspect, which is this one. First one, Singapore has 20 effective free trade agreements in this moment, including the US. Singapore is also therefore used by a lot of companies as a benchmark, as a strategic foothold to develop new business and to re-export towards other markets in the region like China, South Korea, India, for instance, from a certain perspective, also the Gulf Cooperative Council in the Middle East. And for one simple aspect, which is this one, tax incentives. Companies who register in Singapore benefit of 0%, zero tax for the first 3 years, and there's a cap maximum of 17% corporate tax. No additional added tax, no nothing. Absolutely, it's very simple. It's just taxable income multiplied by 17%. Nobody pays the 17% because every 3 years the government in Singapore provide additional tax rebates in the range of 25 to 30%. So at the very end, a corporation ends up paying 12.1%. And there is no other tax, there is no value-added tax, no nothing. Compared to other competitive markets, in Asia, Hong Kong is 16.5%, but from day one and not after the initial 3 years. And compared to China, it's 25%. In China, there is also a value-added tax of another 25%. So it's definitely ASEAN and Singapore more competitive than the other part. This is just an example of the several special economic zones that every single country within the ASEAN region is proposing in order to attract investors, in order to attract new business, in order to attract exports, mainly from US, Canada, Australia, and the European Union. Iskandar, Malaysia is an example in the southernmost part of Malaysia. It's a size 3 times of Singapore, and it's a fantastic foothold to establish a presence in the region, because the Malaysia government, and this is just an example, I may cite a similar example in Vietnam rather than in Myanmar or in Thailand or in Indonesia, for instance, is incentivizing companies from these service sectors and from these free manufacturing sectors to step into the market. Last slide. ASEAN is a challenging market. It's not that easy in the sense that anyone who is willing to step into the market for export, joint ventures, or foreign direct investment needs to acquire a structural understanding of the market, which means consider and adapt to all the cultural differences. You cannot copy and paste a business model that we are accustomed in our domestic markets in the US or in Europe and replicate on the other side. It's important to understand that in ASEAN and in Asia, relationships comes before results. If you do not build a relation, it's going to be very difficult to develop any kind of business. Before stepping into the market, create a market research, do your own works, make some studies, analyze your market, the competitive advantage of your products towards local products and competition. And also, this is important, and the reason why I haven't named 1 and 2 is because they go on the same level. We need a modern thinking approach. Every single company, especially in the Western world, has a global vision and think that it works all across 360 degrees under every latitude. It doesn't work this way. You need to understand that in order to be successful in ASEAN, you have to bespoke, to customize the market entry, even for just a simple export operation, to the regional strategy and local tactic. That is absolutely important for one simple reason. The product doesn't sell itself. We are in a region where consumers are looking towards brand awareness and brand identity. And this requires a lot of marketing activities to promote the product in this region. I'm done. I'm over time. I know that. Okay.
Thank you, Antonio. I wish we had a lot more time.